Welcome back, welcome all. Springtime Fringe family.
That is us. And you?
I just want to play the singing bowl real quick and do a deep breath with everyone, if you'll join me. Well,
I feel attuned.
oh, beautiful, and I'm glad you feel attuned.
I felt my chakras lining up.
Well, this is releasing March 20th, which is the spring equinox in our northern hemisphere, be the autumn equinox in the southern hemisphere.
Wait, what? Is the equinox now?
Well, when this releases,
oh, nice,
on Monday, March 20th, we'll be at the spring equinox. So I wanted to bring that to the table today. Everything equinox and balance. This is a time when the sun on its axis is directly straight up. And so it's neither in tilt in either direction. So there's an equal balance of day and night on both sides of the hemispheres. And this is when the sun begins to come back to us, and renewal.
Finally.
And rejuvenation.
Is this what daylight savings time is about?
Creation flow comes into play. And it's, for myself personally, I consider this the beginning of the year. We're coming out of Pisces, or we will be, and going into Aries, which is the first sign of the astrological chart, which is the I'm going to take another deep breath real quick. I just want to sit in observance and appreciation. So welcome.
Nice. I heard something about speaking of astrology, that someone was looking at it, and they're trying to correlate the different signs to people's, like the seasonality of food. Like how people, like in the summer, they generally eat more, the moms will eat more carrots and stuff, like in the womb, and just what people eat while they're in the womb, and how that affects people, like long term, like not, I guess, personality, but also just physically, personality, all kinds of stuff. But I found that kind of interesting, because I never thought about correlating that to the seasonality of food. But I guess that's a little lost nowadays in terms of seasonality, because everyone eats anything any time of year.
Well,
not that I buy it. I just heard that, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. I think there is whenever you come into this plane, I think how can the stars and where everything is, how can that not affect and shape you, like, as you come into this place?
Exactly, and that's what I am feeling immensely right now, and what I was speaking about a month ago. But about the energies of the time, the energies of March, and that there's this big celestial happening where where there's a lot of energy coming into play, and what people in my spheres and circles of life and community are calling the new earth energy, which has a lot to do with planetary alignments. It has a lot to do with astrologically, but many other people are saying galactically, with entities and energies and universal beings coming back to visit, but wanting to raise our vibrations to match that of what we are wanting for ourselves this year. And in this very moment, just presently, what are we wanting for ourselves, and matching that vibration so that we can be the creator gods of whatever it is that we're wanting to create right now. There's a lot of energies that are, and cosmic energy that's pulling for us in that direction of global healing and of personal alignments that are, where the inner matches the outer, as above, so below, as within, so without. So as we all align ourselves more with what's calling our hearts and what's calling us, that's been calling us for so long, is finally wanting to come to fruition. So dissolving all of that old paradigm energy, whatever's been holding you back from achieving these things, let it go. Let it go. Align yourself, open your heart more, because there's a big, powerful shift this equinox, so that we will have more energy alignment in order to be able to achieve those things. But back to what you were saying about, so you were saying that women are naturally drawn to eat more seasonally whenever they're in gestation?
No, they were just saying like, just correlating like different traits of people to, like nutrients and how that like shapes the fetus, like just while they're, not that they're drawn to it, but just, back in the day, like when, you had to eat seasonally, but they're just saying like, whenever you just, yeah, it just depends like what's being grown and then what you're eating, the time of the year, like, I don't know what carrots, just all the different vitamins those have versus, if you're born in the winter, like, I guess it'd be like, different trimesters, like in the winter, like there'd just be different, you just be absorbing different stuff, but I don't know. I don't really, I think there's something to it, but I don't know in terms of like personality, in terms of, traits and stuff, but I could definitely see it
So
like physically, but
are you saying that the nutrients specifically correlate to the personality development of the child?
that's what I don't remember where I heard that, but that's what
Mm-hmm.
some guy's theory was. But
Right.
but I think they were trying to do that in terms of like dismissing like any type of astrological stuff. But so I don't know. I don't know if it was dismissive, but it was definitely kind of like, oh, it's not really about the stars. It's more about what you eat. But
That's
which
such a
there's something.
dualistic approach to
Yeah,
things. I believe in a holistic approach where everything affects upon the other. Everything affects everything. And it all works in synchronicity with everything else. I don't lean towards anything singularly, and especially in my practice of celebrating the equinox. I'm celebrating the sun. I'm celebrating rebirth. I'm celebrating myself. I'm celebrating just everything that is to do with the abundance and growth of new life. And in celebrating myself, speaking of astrologically, I've been delving back into rereading my natal chart, which I like to do from time to time, just to fall back in love with myself again, and attunement with myself, with the alignments that I feel, because there's a lot to that feels really accurate to me, and it feels like truth in my body. So
we should put a link to. We'll do in the show notes like to do a free natal chart birth. But I was
yeah, Astro
you talking
Sofa
about.
has a free natal birth chart that's pretty intensive
Yeah, and it gives you
for
like a physical
a free
diagram
chart.
too. But
Yeah.
speaking of like, if I like to worship something, I don't even know. Like, I wouldn't pick. There's not many things I worship, but like I definitely like worship the sun, because like I remember like living in my car, and like especially like in Colorado, when it was like in the winter. There's nothing I looked forward to. Like when I'm freezing in my trunk, there's nothing I look forward to more. Is I'm like, dude, when is the sun gonna rise? I'm like, please, like give me some warmth, and then
Exactly.
I don't know, like so when you're actually in like situations like that, and then if you actually grow stuff or just actually observe the sun, you're like, oh, I'm like, thank you, you're here. I'm like, thank you for your warmth and keeping me alive. And
Right, precisely. And what's kind of ironic, but also in the balance, speaking about equinox, equa meaning, the etymology of this is equa meaning equal, and nox meaning night, and that means that there's equal night for each
oh,
hemisphere. So this is where, because again, the sun isn't tilted on its axis in either direction; it's directly straight up. So we all celebrate in the sun coming back in to our lives in a direct way and a very powerful way, so that all life can be birthed. So the celebration of the sun, it's such an ancient practice, and honoring the sun god, and appreciation of renewal of life and growth and abundance from the sun. This has been a practice that, I mean, I always hark back to ancient wisdoms, because that's whenever we were fully aligned with cosmic phenomena. Whenever we paid attention, we were steeped in that. We didn't have any modern Western distraction. It's ever present in, the positioning of their houses, and the planting seasons, and the celebration seasons, and the architecture, and the directions that the architecture was built in. And of course, we're all aware of, of Egypt and the Sphinx, being in alignment with, direct alignment with the summer solstice, right? Which some archaeologists would argue to say that they just found this rock, and that's where the rock was positioned. But how can you explain that it's directly in alignment with the sun in June, with the summer solstice? I mean, look at
Which rock? What are you talking about? What part?
The Sphinx.
Oh, well, there's a whole thing about that, like it being, because it was originally a lion, but you could tell, because if you look at it, the head is way smaller than the body, right. So they think it was originally a lion, but they said it points directly toward I think it's during an equinox, points directly toward the Leo constellation.
Yes.
And so they talk about like every 26,000 years is when it points to it, and so they were specifically Graham Hancock was talking about that, where he thinks it's way older. Like, I forget how many thousand years ago it points to it, but he thinks it was built with the timelines. He thinks it was older than, it goes back all the way to the other 26,000 years. So he thinks it's like older than that at least. But
yes, speaking to those cycles and celebrations, and I mean, there's so many buildings, architecture from around the world that are examples of them celebrating the spring equinox. Like, for instance, the Stonehenge in England. And then, that reminds me of Inzalo, Yalanya, which is in Africa, and which is referred to as Adam's calendar. And it's known as the world's oldest calendar, and actually the world's most accurate calendar, and oldest.
That reminds me, have you heard, I've seen videos of this where people, they go to Ethiopia and they say, like, what year is it? And they're like in 2014, because, like, yeah, we don't use that Gregorian calendar. Like, we have our own calendar system. But exactly. And then you talking about old architecture, like, and I know there's been studies about this, about how what direction your head faces when you sleep. Like, you're supposed to, like, sleep to the north. I've heard
from north to south.
But I've also heard different things where, like, you don't want to have like a positive to a positive, but I think sleeping to the north is the best. And then
I've always thought it that way.
Like in Native Americans, their teepees, the entrance always face to east, so that just
so that
sun can rise,
sunlight, so that you can rise, because whenever the sun starts to come into your eyes, that's whenever you start to naturally rise. That's why, with tech and people being on their phones late at night, the melatonin doesn't get to rise in your brain the way it's supposed to, and this is why people have so many sleep disturbances. So you're able to sleep because especially if you sun gaze and you watch a sunset, the melatonin rises in your brain, you become relaxed, and then you're able to sync up with your own natural biorhythms and go to bed with ease and stay asleep, and then rise with the sun.
I heard someone say, I think they did studies on it, but even if you have like a laser like on your foot, like your calf or something, even that affects your circadian rhythm. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about just the importance of not having lights late at night, but
any detection of light.
And one more, speaking of another equinox seasonal thing, I wish I would have saw it when I was there. I didn't realize it was there, but at Chaco Canyon, where the old Anasazi ruins, somewhere around there's that old ancient, I guess it's a calendar where there's like a spiral, someone like etched a spiral on a rock, and it's wedged in between these two rocks, and so there's like a beam of light that comes, and then in the winter,
Yes,
the light
right.
it's at the very end of the spiral, and then summer equinox it's right in the middle, and then spring it's like way on this part of the spiral. I'll put a
Yes.
picture up, but it
So there's so many natural structures and ancient structures that paid attention to the seasons and lived by the seasons and lived by the cosmos and the alignments of the cosmos, the sun, the moon, and how important that was to them. And especially our own natural, like you're saying, circadian rhythms, our biorhythms, our own natural seasonal living. And we're programmed differently now. So I encourage everyone, if you do acknowledge the equinox, which is hard to do because it's ingrained and built into our very DNA and our own systems, even though those have been reprogrammed and trained out of us. Just to just to, I don't know how you celebrate, but if if you do, it's just to go outside, be barefoot, acknowledge the sun, give gratitude and thanks to the plants and to the light and to the warmth, and just to be present in nature and be present with yourself, and to show some gratitude for what is and where we are in the present moment. And in some cultures, they celebrate from the 20th to the 23rd. It just depends on where the solstice lands on their own personal calendars. And I'm all about that 3 day celebration because, I mean, for me, spring is sprung as a gardener and as a homesteader and as a person who just spends a lot of time frolicking in nature. I just pay attention to when spring has sprung for me whenever buds start to break and grass starts to show and the animals start changing behavior, and I can feel the warmth of the soil, and I can see the shifting of the sun, that it was very low setting and now it's rising, and the alignment of the constellations. And so
I notice in my cold showers, I'm like, oh, it's not as cold
mm.
anymore.
Yeah, I just took one right before we started recording. Oh, so
But speaking about
lovely.
being in the sun, I heard that they said that like if you do 3 times a week, like 20 minutes at a time, like tanning, just getting sunlight, and then not a shirt on, like as much skin as you can,
Yeah.
that like releases free testosterone in your body and like all these other
Mm-hmm.
hormones. It's vitamin D. I heard that it's responsible for like what that expression of like 1,000 of your genes, which I
Mm-hmm.
think we have like 26,000. I don't remember how many we have, like 24 or 25,000 or something, but and how that just opens up all your stuff to get flowing, and that just how great it is for your hormonal health, let alone your because your skin's an organ, so
Precisely.
like it needs that vitamin.
It needs it.
And
But
most vitamin
it's
D
not
supple.
just, yeah, it's not just your skin, like you said. And vitamin D is responsible for so many different interactions in your body and transactions taking place, like and so many other vitamins actually, they need vitamin D for synthesis. And
Right, it's like a precursor.
right. So I like to, like, I was just in my reels on Instagram today talking about how I like to take my super smoothie that I make every day after I do a moderate amount of intermittent fasting, and I'll take it outside and I'll get as naked as I can, if not naked, and drink it in the sun. And you have to really stay outside for at least 15 to 20 minutes in order for the melanin to activate in your skin. It's longer for people with more melanin in their skin, but
Yeah, darker people need
yeah,
more time.
at least 15 minutes in the sun, barefoot on the ground, eating a piece of fruit.
Dude,
Like, just take,
get your
if you just
armpits in
take your
the
break.
sun. That's my
Yeah,
favorite because it's like when you lift up your arms, you see how white they are. So I'm like, there's something
right.
to like where the sun don't shine. And I hate people like the Liver King and shit. We're talking about like butthole tanning, and they just that guy was just such a joke, so it gives it a bad name. But I think there's something to getting like your ass, your genitals, your armpits like in the sun. Like it feels
Well, your
amazing.
butthole also it's amazing because it absorbs 7 times faster than any other soft tissue, like
Ooh,
sensitive membranes in your body. You have, other sensitive membranes, but that skin is so sensitive that it actually absorbs it seven
mine's
times
a little
faster.
bushy,
So
so
it's
I
kind
might
of
get a little blocked.
it's kind of like You know, the quick. It's a quick button.
Button. It looks like a little button.
It's a pleasure button too. Um. Anyway, what were we speaking on before we went on the butthole tanning
The only
tangent?
thing I can think of was I was thinking about it's sad that people have to, I mean, I guess it's good to supplement in the winter, but like vitamin D3 tablets, like that, I mean, you know, it's just get the sun, man. It's
Mm,
the way easier, natural way to do it. But I remember learning this when I was vegan, that like most of those are made out of like chicken feathers and like just old shit like that. And I was like, what?
mm-hmm.
I'm like, these aren't even vegan. And I was like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. It's just, I'm like, dude,
It's just
just go in
highly
the sun.
processed animals, and that's, you
So I
know,
guess I'm glad they're using the scraps of it, I guess. But,
yeah. But memories stored in tissues and issues are
ooh,
stored in the tissues.
good
So
point. Ooh,
I would like to talk about, just for a split second while we're on that subject, is speaking about sourcing your meat, and where you source your meat is really vitally important. Not just because where we source our meat perpetuates a system of abuse and corporate control, but also that it's, I mean, this is scientifically proven too. If that's something that you need as a person for debatable purposes, but issues are stored in the tissues, and experiences, memory is stored in the tissues. So be careful what tissues you eat and where they come from. Is my point.
I found this. I was listening to this audiobook, Stiff by Mary Roach, and she was talking about. She went on a tangent on this part, but she's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm just kind of going up." But she was talking about there was. It was like in 1981. There was like an army study because they're trying to just. They're. This is back when they were big into remote viewing and stuff. But they took these cheek cells from a guy, and then they put them in. You know, I don't know what, like, petri dish or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then they took the guy who they took the swab from, and they put him in another room, and then they showed him like violent videos, like of, I don't know what the hell they were showing
Mm-hmm.
him, and then you know he had a reaction, you know, he was like, oh, and then they said the cells in the next room had a quote extreme agitation,
Right.
and just saying how it's, you know, the entanglement of that, and then they said they did it at like up to 50 miles, like they do it, and the cheek cells would show like agitation.
It's just proof of quantum entanglement, like you were telling me about the rabbit that was taken from her bunnies. And were you telling me about that?
I don't know.
And
Go on.
she was put into a submarine. It just seems so intense of a. Okay, so there was this
Don't you
experiment.
love science?
Maybe this was something that I was watching, because
Doesn't
it's
sound
funny
familiar.
that you bring up remote viewing, because I was just watching. I went down another rabbit hole of remote viewing, because I've been praying at night while everyone's been sleeping. I've been meditating to the energies that be, my higher self, my inner truth, to bring back, through loving myself completely, every single cell, every single piece of myself. I want to bring back my greatest, strongest gifts that were very powerful and present before I experienced what most people would label as CPTSD now. And so I've been reconnecting with her and that, and those things, and also integrating and lacing in who I am today, and weaving this new version. Because we are the creator gods of ourselves, and we can become whomever that version that we want to be at any time. And so, where was I before I went on that tangent?
A rabbit in the submarine?
Okay, so there
Remote
was an
viewing?
experiment, right? There was an experiment about quantum entanglement. And I'm not sure if it was specifically about quantum entanglement, but they took a mother rabbit and they separated her from her brood. What do you call? Anyway, from her litter, and they put her in a submarine and took her out into the water. At least this is how I remember it. And they separated her from her litter, and then they killed 2 of the bunnies. And they said that the mother was deeply distressed, even though she was a ridiculous amount of miles away. And that is something I can relate to with my children. I can always feel when they're in distress, or I can feel them all the time when they're coming, when they wake up, when they're but yeah, that, I mean, it's awful that we're so detached from our own human nature that we'd have to conduct these cruel experiments, you know, by modern science in order to prove things that we all, if we were still connected with ourselves, we innately know. And these are things that we would innately know pre-programming. So this is why I'm always speaking with people about programming themselves, about, you know, deprogramming, unlearning and relearning for yourself what your own personal truths are, and to get closer to what that is every day. Especially through practicing what we were speaking on in the last episode, which is the 6 doctors. And I wanted to kind of, I wanted to expound upon that with just a few advices on focusing on what those were, which were, nutrition, sleep, movement, water, sun, and breath, fresh air. And so my immediate advices for that would be to pre-cook nutritious food that are mostly whole foods, that are the cleanest you can possibly obtain for yourself, the cleanest versions of those. Having mindfulness in source of food, growing your own food as much as possible. If you have one window in your apartment, you can grow some food. You can grow some herbs. You can grow a few things. You can hang baskets and grow your tomatoes, whatever it may be. Grow your favorite stuff. So it'd be food, and then sleep, just getting adequate sleep, allowing yourself to rest, taking naps if need be. Movement, exercise would be just dance. If you haven't danced in a long time, you know, there's a lot of ancient wisdoms that would ask you, you know, if you came to them in distress and they say, well, when was the last time you danced? When was the last time you cried? When was the last time you laughed? So in movement, dance, sex, self-love, go for a walk barefoot in the grass, move around, just move, you know, just see how fast you can sprint up the street, stretch, just really playing with your body. And then with fresh water, changing your relationship to water. So bottled water is dead water. If you can get to a water machine, that's probably, you know, 10 times, 1,000 times better than drinking water out of the tap or out of a bottle. And
yeah,
then
don't touch tap water, man. That's no bueno.
livening up water, spiraling it and talking to it, because water also holds memory, and sound flows through water faster than even air. So whenever that reminds us to speak to ourselves with kinder words, to love every droplet of water in our body fully. So changing our relationship to water. And then sunbathing. I get the luxury, well, it's not as luxurious as it used to be because we've had so many new people move into our spaces out here. But to be naked in the sun, to, you know, even just as much skin exposed to the sun as possible, sunbathe, have a conversation with the sun, have a conversation with the air. If you could drink fresh living water while breathing in the sun and eating a piece of fruit while you're barefoot, and dancing or singing, all of these things, just experiencing yourself elementally within the elements and practicing mindfulness with the 6 doctors, and you will notice how quickly you elevate your own vibration, and how much you start to truly manifest in your life, because your vibration is, you're just a buzzing with life, and you're more connected with yourself and with the all.
I heard uh that Huberman guy talking about that, like adding one to that being relationships, just in terms of human social dynamics and how that's like essential to our health too. Like, sure
Yeah.
there's sure there's some people who are more naturally inverted but introverted, but
Mhm.
just the benefit, because we're social beings, so just the benefits of
Yes.
caring about people and like having interest and just the benefits. Obviously that's because I
Well,
don't
and
know
we
if you're like
change
if
our
you're in the
yeah.
desert, all by yourself and you're wandering out, like the first thing you're gonna want is water, which is one of those, and then
Mhm.
you're not gonna nobody comes crawling out of the desert and it's like, man, I could really go for a soda right now, but and then you also want to like find people for help, but yeah, just for the
mm.
like, oh, finally some human contact. And
Yes.
another thing on water, I remember him saying the just how our organs are different, like at different times of the day. Like people just think they're the same all throughout the day, but
Mhm.
and he was talking about how he was talking to some other
Our
guy who
organs
had
have
some he
seasons
had a
as well.
problem with peeing in the middle of the night, like getting up at 3 a.m. and peeing. And then this guy was telling him an easy fix for that is uh, at the end of the night, you know, some people, I used to do this when I was in high school and for soccer, I would just chug a bottle of water because I was like, man, yeah, 8 hours is a long time to go without water. But but he just said to trickle it. And then like when you wake up, that's the time to chug it because that's when you're, I don't remember what organ he was talking about, but that's when your body's more able to like, because you need a lot more when you wake up
Yeah.
to just get everything flowing and stuff. So I thought that was
Mhm.
interesting because I sometimes do that before I go to bed.
Right.
I just chug, but I
Also,
don't
that
really
can
have.
be there could be a correlation with that in your organs and waking up at 3 a.m. Because that's like that is the best time to practice intuitive or psychic abilities or to commune with ancestors or commune with whomever you want to reach out to because that's the sensitive as they call the witching hour, which has been given a really bad connotation, but there's reasons you're waking up at 3 a.m. And of course, if you have to pee, you have to exchange out your water. It's kind of like changing your oil. So you have to bring more water into your body if you're, uh, losing water. You got to exchange it out because that's what your kidneys do. They filter the water from your blood, all the impurities, and then um, you're able to bring in new life into your blood. So water is life. I agree with him about the relationships too. But I think firstly it's important to change our relationship with self. And thusly that shifts the relationship we have with the all, with source, with God, if you will. And then we're able to pour that into everyone else.
Another thing about the organ thing, he was talking about like if you take ashwagandha, how that like lowers cortisol levels. But
Mm-hmm.
he said like you want naturally more because cortisol isn't like always bad, but like you want because you naturally have more of it when you in the AM hours, and so you want more. He was basically saying to take that like late day at midday, late day to so you will have less cortisol when you go to sleep because that keeps you up and stuff too. But
Mm-hmm.
the I don't know, I just found that interesting about all these different organs and different time, just how they have different jobs during different hours.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Your own body you have body clock. Everything has its own season and I mean, whenever you know that your body is its own universe in itself and its own ecosystem in itself, and that everything functions much like when the inner becomes the outer becomes the inner, like I was saying earlier. Uh, so without as within, uh, when you start to understand that all systems operate this way, that nothing operates independently or um, that it's all its own ecosystem. We actually reflect the earth as well. We're like a microcosm of the uh, macrocosm of the earth and all of her different systems and functions, and it's so beautiful. So beautiful how
Yeah, I guess this
everything.
falls into relationships too, but I heard that there was like some study with old people and like they did 100 of them and 50 of them were taking care of a house plant and 50 weren't, and the 50 that took care of the house plant lived longer, which I guess because
Mm-hmm.
I guess you ever you're tending to something, you're taking care of something, so I guess that's relationship as well. But
Yes. Do you remember that experiment? that kind of went viral some years ago. But it was about a principal who had everybody write their name on a balloon, and then they released them out into the hallway, and they had
Uh-uh.
everyone try to find their own name. And everyone failed. No one could find their own name. But then they said, okay, go back in the classrooms. We're going to reset. We'll do it again. And this time we want you to find your classmates' names. And so one by one, everyone ended up finding each other's names for them, and and they got their own balloon back as well. And there weren't any balloons left in the hallway. So, I mean, tending to others and being helpful to others and showing others compassion and love and
Just less ego, less me. Like, where's my balloon?
yeah,
Me. I
it
need my
actually
name versus like, oh,
right,
I found Joe's. Like, let me go give this to Joe, and like,
it actually ended up helping you because someone else gave you back your name as well.
yeah, and it's just more efficient, and yeah, that makes sense. And I've been that audiobook I've been listening to, Stiff. Like, they were talking about she was talking about some crazy shit in there, but like harping back to you talking about the weird stuff we have to do to figure stuff out. Like, there was for a while there, an old ancient debate of like, where does the soul live in the body, and some people thought it was the heart, some people thought it was the brain, some thought the pineal gland, and they were talking about these it was like in France, but they were doing all kinds of crazy shit. Like, they would, like, after they'd guillotine some heads, there'd be a couple times they'd take them, and then the guy would, they were trying to figure out because they say like when they did it, like there'd be like people they thought for at least 30 seconds they'd still be alive, like because they said like their teeth would be grimacing, and obviously they can't talk because their vocal cords are gone, but and then they just like eyes blinking and stuff, but and then so they would like try to like reattach, they'd put like cow's blood in them, and like and just to like see if like what would happen if there's like a blood supply back in there, and then there was like some movement and stuff. So then I think that's kind of like why they got rid of the guillotine, because they used to say it was the most humane way to do it. And then one guy, I can't remember the time frames of these, but it was all like in weird European times. But they like put it one dog's head and they attached it to this other dog's head, and they got it to like live for I think like 8 days. But I think the main dog, they kept like trying to attack each other because obviously they're like, what the hell is this thing on me? And they're this foreign entity attached to me. But I'm like, just to think, I'm like, what are the point of these studies? But she was talking about how they were thinking this could be used to like for a paraplegic, because people think it's called a head transplant, but they were saying it's more like a body transplant. So like if there's like a paraplegic guy, if you can put it on a working body, then it might work. And they were doing that shit to monkeys, and it's just like, like what is it, like what is any of this necessary? Like, just the killing of these poor animals, but also just I mean, I guess it's like different times and shit, but I'm like, man, that is like absurd. Just even like who's trying this shit? But
It makes me so uneasy, the cruelty through curiosity.
yeah, well, she was talking about like certain like law applications. Like there was this was because there's like legally like you're dead, considered dead if you're brain dead. So there's like because the whole book's about cadavers and all the glory that and stuff that cadavers have done for us, like anywhere from like crash test dummies to well, not dummies, they're real bodies, but like practicing surgeries and all kinds of stuff.
Right,
But
just the study of human anatomy.
yeah, and just just to use it for like the closest to real world application. But there was where was I going with that? I can't remember, but
I don't know, you were just sharing bits of the book.
there was
What is this book called?
Stiff.
Stiff.
There was one part I thought was interesting with heart transplants. There, and some people were like trying to dismiss it afterwards. She was saying, but there's like people who get heart transplants and they swear they take on like personality traits of the person. Like there's like a 60-year-old guy who got like a 17-year-old heart transplant. And then he said after that he started listening to loud music in headphones, and like something he's never done before.
This is what I'm saying.
Classic teenager thing. And there was one
it's stored in the tissues.
One woman who she got a heart transplant of a former prostitute, which I don't think she knew, but then she said afterwards she started renting X-rated movies and just being more promiscuous and demanding sex from her husband every night, and then
Right.
and so I don't know, that shit like that's fascinating.
Oh goodness! Every time, see, this is why I'd love to compare notes pre-show because I always come up with things that I know, um, that ping back into my memory after we finish recording that I would have loved to be able to bring up in the show because there's so many stories that I know like this, especially one that comes to mind is the eye transplant that happened in the 70s. They actually made a couple of movies about it. But you hear these stories all the time that the people started getting visions of their death or of the person's death that donated the eyes.
Yeah, it's happened
Or
with hearts too. Yeah.
right, so people that are blind and they get the eye transplants and they're able to see, they start seeing visions of the of just memories that are stored in the eyes.
Would you donate your organs to transplant, or because she was talking about when some people they agree to donate their body to science, but that's such a vague thing. Like sometimes they use it to for like ballistics. I don't know if they still do, but
Right.
they'd cut someone's job is to cut dead people's heads off, and then they get used from anything from like surgeons practicing like cuts and stitches and to
Hmm.
like even like ballistics to like just getting shot in the face and
All sorts of
like
things. They don't tell you what
yeah,
your
like
body goes to
and they're just like,
whenever
yeah,
you
that'd be
donate it to
that sounds
science.
great, but then like, but they don't tell you like, oh, Grandpa got used to just get shot in the head. You're like, wow, that's great,
Right.
I don't know, but yeah, I was talking about how cadavers, yeah, they've done a lot for us for, and then just that so many there's like 80,000 people on like a
Right.
heart transplant list, but and how few people do it, but
So I am an organ donor, and in my will, I do. I mean, I am an organ donor, but that would be fascinating to just donate my whole body to science. But really, I want to be eaten by vultures off the side of a cliffside, or have a Viking funeral, or
I mean,
um,
if I were to die young, I would definitely want it. I wouldn't want it to go to science. I'd want it to go to like
right.
use my organs type of thing.
I
But
love all of these beautiful new technologies too because I'm really about I don't really appreciate the Western practices of burial and the whole
just our ritual of that.
ooh I
Yeah,
yeah.
she was talking a lot about
What I'm
that with
saying is
the
like the monetization of death
yeah, it's
and the
expensive to
whole
die.
yeah, it's more expensive to die than it is to be born and just the racket that has been created around death, it really pisses me off actually, but I love that there's all these new innovations like because I was going to say I'd even love to be planted underneath a fruit tree. But now there's ways, there's all these technologies and ways to be able to do that. There's like
You can be put into like a coral
burial
reef.
bags, and you can be put into a reef, and you can have a tree growing out of you, and so we're actually harking back to natural practices of burial, and I love that. Just being able to be reabsorbed back into the system of Earth naturally, it excites me.
Yeah, she was talking about the just the practice of because I'm assuming it's very. I don't know what they do in other countries, but I'm assuming it's very American because that's where it started. But the practice of embalming and how that's because every funeral open they didn't have open casket funerals until like the late
Right.
1800s because that started with in the civil was it Civil War in the 1800s? Yeah, because they were soldiers would die, and then the family members don't have anything from them, so had to figure out ways to ship the bodies back. So they'd practice this thing of embalming, so
Mm-hmm.
so they could ship it for so the family could see it. But and then now we have that's like the standard, but that's such a recent thing. And then
Yeah, it
she was
is.
talking about how one because I thought this is what I used to think because I thought when you're embalmed I thought you're like that like for like forever for like hundreds of years, but she was saying like
It's just
she's
fresh,
still
just long enough.
she's yeah just to get some makeup on you to for this weird thing because I remember going to a funeral
Well, it's
and
a
then
ritual.
it was my ex's grandma at the time and then I just remember like it was an open funeral and I remember like she did a lot for me so I remember like seeing her in there and I remember like touching her hand and my first thought was damn dude she is ice cold and then she was
Mm.
like there's like that's just the shell of that person like they are not in there anymore. I know that's her body but I'm like that's nothing. But yeah, speaking back to the embalming, the yeah, I thought it lasted forever, but she said there was like a couple. undertakers who would advertise the that it's like eternal, and like so, and then some guy took him up on it, and like every 5 years he would dig up his grandma, and then to see how she was, and I forget how long it took, but eventually you do still turn to mush, like you still dissolve, but I guess you're still in a box. But what do you drink on these podcasts? Every time
It's
you
just water.
you're always
It must be something in here. Or it's just that season. Wow, my voice. Wow.
I'm trying to remember what else was interesting on there. I'm only like 3/4 of the way, but
Nice. Oh, well, you had asked me if I would want to donate my
oh
body,
right,
and
your organs.
just speaking about tissues retaining memory and the importance of reprogramming our water in our body. A lot of trauma work I'd want to, that really just makes me want to rewrite the traumas in my body even more, so that when anyone did receive anything donated by my body, that it would be just beautiful memories stored in my tissue, and it would be a wonderful time, hopefully, for them. Since personality traits show up so frequently.
Yeah, because
That's such a frequent.
I remember
It's
hearing
such a
people
frequent thing.
talking.
How could it not be truth? You remember?
I remember hearing people talk about they don't want to be organ donors because if they get in a car wreck, if they see that, they're like, oh yeah, let's let them die so they can use their organs. But that's not really a thing. But they were damn, what was I going with that? Organs. Oh, I can't remember. One thing I remember is this was back to the. I don't want to talk about that.
Oh, well, much earlier in the episode, we were talking about the calendars, ancient calendars and ancient architecture, and excuse me, one that I had forgotten was in Germany, the Neolithic hinge. And in fact, there was also this newspaper article that I stumbled upon recently. It was written in 1858, on January 6th, by the Raftsman Journal, an article called Antiquities in America, and it discusses the many ruins and structures from around our continent that are not officially discussed in history. And so it got me thinking about like the labyrinth of caves in the Grand Canyon that are filled with Egyptian and antediluvian relics.
What? Diluvian?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Deluge?
Diluvian.
Never heard that word before.
That's another deep dive.
Yeah, have you ever seen those? It's like all over the world, but there's like I'm pretty sure it's specifically a bird-headed guy, but he's always like it looks like he's carrying like a little bag, and then he always has like a spiral. Oh, I watch him with like I don't know if it's like I think it's like a little star pattern, but that it's those specific things, and the bird head is specifically. It's like in like Mexico, it's in Egypt, it's like all over the place.
Right. So those are the bluebird people, the blue aliens, and they say that I've heard that the watch is actually, it's like an old sundial, so it's literally a watch. And or some people believe that it could be the way that they communicate or the way that they materialize here. There's a lot of theories around that watch. You were saying?
I just remember reading, and I think this was Fingerprints of the Gods, but it was talking about that specifically, and how, and like, I think it was the Mayan culture, but they had some belief about some visitor that was like, I think he was white or white haired, and then the theory is like, yeah, there's like literally like people back then like traveling, whether it's physically on boats or through like star portals or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
that they were, just going around. I don't know if they were like assisting in the construction of stuff, but people, the standard narrative of history is like, oh, we came out of Africa and then people crossed the land bridge and then came down, but like there's so many things that like go against that timeline.
Precisely. Especially, okay, so speaking to this, it gets me thinking about, like I was saying earlier, the spheres of and friends and community that I play in. We're all talking. They're all talking about, um, the UFO sightings and the orb sightings, and us raising our vibration and walking into new Earth, and being able to, hopefully within this year, get to a point of reintroducing ancient technologies that we once had, and being able to be open enough and in love enough to make contact, and for there to be contact with the Galactic Federation.
Oh boy.
It's very interesting. So, I mean, we all know that our history is a lie, that most history is a lie, that it's rewritten, and that there's a lot that's been reprogrammed. We've been reprogrammed. I am open to these ideas, surrounding the new Earth energy, and that there's new technologies that are going to come into play, because that's the energy that we're in with the cosmic alignments, and that there will be new eyes, fresh eyes to see, and
I used to believe in aliens a lot, but that was back when it went against the grain of thinking. But I remember that Bill Cooper, who wrote "Behold the Pale Horse," he was talking about
yeah,
how he came to the conclusion that because he was finding, I can't remember his story, but I remember he was finding all the, basically he came to the conclusion that he was finding evidence that the government was wanting him to find this like UFO alien stuff, and then so he came to the conclusion that, oh yeah, it was like a setup and that they wanted him to, but and then because I used to, but now when I start seeing UFO shit on like CNN, and I mean I don't watch it, but I hear people talking about that, like it's on like
mm-hmm.
mainstream news and like the government's talking about it, and I'm just like, I don't know anymore now, because the whole theory behind that is that if they create an alien invasion, and then that makes like a global war, it's like a planetary war,
Mm-hmm.
if it's like that, and so that's grounds to create like a one world government, because now we need like a global military, because now we got to fight these things, but so I don't know, I'm just hesitant to believe in it, especially now that it's so like mainstream thinking now, like, but I don't know, but I'm open. I'm still open that there are like you know
Well, there's always going to be that trickster energy, and that energy,
it's 4D chess.
those energies that, exactly, those energies that want to practice sleight of hand and keep you focused on another problem, or to
Right.
have you play right into their hand so that they can gain power and control.
I feel like it's those
I do
that old
feel. Hmm,
it's like that old boxing trick where people like look over here and they're like, shaking this hand and they're like bam, hit you with this one. They're like, it's that kind of thing,
yes,
but
but also that isn't the reality that I want to live in. So that's not the reality that I choose to accept. And I do, because I am a global feeler. I have always been. Um, my my mom used to always say, you can't take on the weight of the world on your shoulders, honey, because I used to just I used to cry. I used to, feel. I feel everything and everyone quite intensely at times. So sometimes it's even difficult to decipher what is mine and what is others, if I'm out of balance with myself. But whenever I am in attunement and alignment, I feel like I have been and practicing on staying in attunement and alignment very consciously. lately, because I do feel these shifts, and because I do the things that I have been studying, and the information that has been brought to me. Some of it really does ring like truth
Is this in
in my
regards to
center.
aliens? Is that what you're saying? You
Not necessarily aliens as they've been, you know, shown to us or taught to us, but just interdimensional beings, and us all being interdimensional beings ourselves, especially in thinking, like you had mentioned earlier about how these time travelers, I see them as possibly being our future selves coming back, because all time exists all at once, right? It's spherical, it's not linear, but we're taught to think linearly. So if, like, I think we spoke on this once about the grays being a possible timeline of us as future selves being, I don't believe that we're the only species or living beings. Obviously we're not. I mean, if you look at a teaspoon of soil, there is a whole universe in that. So of course there's universes within universes within universes within universes. And I just don't believe, I don't feel that other life looks like us or is going to present to us like ourselves. But and also,
that
some
also
things are just really undeniable.
that also brings
Energy is
in
undeniable. Mm-hmm. Also brings up what?
the argument of like if people believe in non-embodied consciousness, like they think life like has to have a body, like it has to be in this like earthen like legged form. But I mean, if you saw a video of like an octopus, you've never seen an octopus before, and they like NASA says, look at this thing we found, and you saw that thing in space, you're like, whoa, look at that fucking, that's definitely an alien. It like changes, communicates with its body, and like it's
Yes.
it's uh just all the weird things that octopus do. But and then what was I gonna talk about? Oh, aliens.
But okay, what I was saying though is that if you're closed off to the idea, or if you're closed off to that part of your imagination, of course you're not going to be able to see. If you don't believe, you're not going to be able to receive that energy, and you're not going to be able to vibrate into that place. So
Yeah, and there's always been like ancient depictions of aliens too, and whether it's like orbs or actual physical entities, and I've even seen like it's up to debate what it is, but there's like this old Renaissance painting where it literally looks like a UFO in the background, and like there's all these like Native American tales of aliens and shit, and like people who live out in the desert, like yeah, we see like
yes.
wild shit all the time, dude.
But what about anything? Are you open, or have you experienced? How do you experience your own brand of spirituality? Or, what's
How do
your
I
cosmic
experience my
sauce?
own brand
Yeah,
of spirituality?
yeah. Have you ever had any energetic communications or visualizations?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I've had definitely on like DMT. I've seen they were like these little like light. The best I could describe it is it looked like light ribbons, but
Mm-hmm.
and I remember one time, I was literally just flying around this like what looked the classic thing of what looked like a giant room, like a big egg of a dome or something, but it was like massive. But and I remember like flying around this. I remember the feeling I had was this thing was showing me around, and we are like having fun and like just flying through all these shapes and colors. And I remember one point it was so grand, and then it like took me into like it felt we were getting squeezed in this like little like bottleneck of a thing, and then like we like but as soon as we passed something, it just went and like opened up, and it was going to the music I was listening to too, but and then it just like opened up into this like other portal. And I remember one time I was listening to binaural beats on my my nice headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if I had a small bit of cannabis, but there's because I did it a couple times with and without. But I remember one time, like listening to it, and then like have my eyes closed and just kind of like meditating to it, and then I remember it's hard to describe, but my perspective, was in this kind of 3D left, right, up, down kind of world, and then my experience was that, and it kind of like shifted up, and there's like a whole nother like plane dimension. I don't know how to. It's hard to describe, but just another. It's kind of like the best I can describe it is like walking on land your whole life, and then you get in the ocean, and you're like, oh, like I can go down now. Like I can't do that on land, but it was like kind of like that, but like up, and I was like, oh, there's
Yes.
like a whole. But it was like I remember like there's a lot of vibration going on, but I don't know. That's the best way I can describe it. It's just like from
Mm-hmm.
land to water, but up. And I was like, whoa, I can like. There's like a whole other dimension up there.
Yes.
But yeah, DMT was totally different because it was just yeah, you're not even like earth and bound. Like I remember one time, and I've heard other people, like you talk about like tunnels in your dreams, but I was in this like
Wormholes.
tunnel that you'd
Mm-hmm.
fly. It was just how I
I
remember
travel.
describing it was just like a tunnel of information. Like it was just flying. There's all kinds of warpy stuff and shapes, and then I
Mm-hmm.
remember then there are occasional times I would just shoot out of the tunnel and I'd be in this whole other like dimension of like just a whole other world of like than what was going on in that tunnel. It's like different shapes and experiences, and it felt like I was in there forever, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I'd shoot back into the tunnel, and when I'd shoot out of it, it was such a grand experience. I totally even forgot about the tunnel because I was so in this other thing. And then and it feels like forever you're in there. Then I shot back in the tunnel, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this tunnel. And then because that in itself was amazing. I'd shoot out again, being a whole nother other
Exactly.
thing, and then I'd just be so in the moment. And then once I go back in the, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this tunnel again. And then I forgot how many times I did that, but
So I call that interdimensional traveling. I do.
it
I've
sure felt
always
like
done
it.
that in my dreams, and sometimes even in waking life if I can meditate. Or I tend to daydream a lot, and I'm able to just traverse the wormholes and what I call like shooting through time. So you can find side tunnels where you can shoot back and forth through different places and times, and sometimes it's a giant spiral that spirals up, and there are these nodes that I can tap into, and then it'll suck me right into a pocket of time. And like you said, you can remember the tunnels, especially whenever you're um, lucid dreaming. You can remember the tunnels and be able to shoot back into the tunnel. I don't speak to a lot of this in the open, and I'm wanting to more and more. I've kept it to myself for a long time. I think since I extracted myself from my family because, for one reason, um, my mother, I come from firstborn daughters, seven, at least 7 generations back, and they're all practicing witches, and very proud witches. And so in ceremony, they used to use me to go transcendental because I can go transcendental quite easily. I can tap into the intention and the question. And sometimes it will bring me to a different place, and I won't realize that I had a vision of something else. Being a future seer, sometimes I get cross connection and cross wiring. And so, anyway, for a long time, I had trained myself away from all of my abilities, gifts, if you will, and I just used them for myself, um, but never really brought them to the public realms, but only used them as in a private way. But now I've been called um, by my guides to bring this more to the public realms, and that there's purpose in that, and that it's meaningful, and to relinquish any fear around that. But I've searched myself because fear didn't fit. It's not fear. I think and it's not a gatekeeping. It's more of just, it's a private practice that, I mean, there's possible fear of judgment in that, or rejection in that, but I honestly, have never really cared about those things. It's more about, I suppose, making it palpable and tangible for the public, and speaking about my personal practices that could be useful for helping other people to tap into that whole realm of existence that we're taught and we're programmed to believe doesn't exist, or that that's all, woo-woo and anything that's impractical. When for people that are like me, it is very practical, and it's our whole existence. It's the way that we operate through intuitive means and through these practices. Like just last night, because I've been asking for the channels to be open again, I had my first DMT-like dream that I haven't had a psychedelic dream in a very long time. And I could actually feel that I was in a lucid state, and I was starting to see the sacred geometry screens, as I would call them. And then I went into this dream of all of these entities piercing through and pulling back this very visible veil, energetic veil, and dissolving it for me. And I flew through to the other side. And I could only hang on to it for a few seconds, what it felt like for a few seconds. And because I didn't have a dream journal by me, and because I woke up to a distraction, there was an alert in the food forest by the rooster. So, immediately it started to unravel and dissolve. But I'm going to be paying closer attention.
Yeah, it's wild how like DMT is the same, like how vivid of an experience. It's like one of the most vivid things you can experience, and then like when,
Yeah.
but it's also like so fleeting. It's like once you're back, you're like, oh man, there's that. And you're like, but it's like a dream. It's like that's why it's good to like either have people around you, watching you, or just like taking notes, or if you just record it and somehow as soon as you're done. But that's what the whole point of like a dream journal and stuff. But
Yes.
it's amazing how like get dreams how vivid they can be, and it's just amazing how like once you're back in this world, you're like, oh, like
Right.
I got to get back into. I guess that's your your ego, because in a good way, because you're like, oh, I got to like focus on this realm, and then but it's just amazing how fleeting those are. They're very slippery.
It's so interesting. That's always been kind of interwoven into my reality, though. So DMT, it just makes me giggle. It makes me laugh because, I also know that you can release natural DMT exists inside your mind. You just, whenever you take DMT, it's a super concentration, just like any other alteration. And, I've also, speaking of altering, I've always been a big fan of being altered because it was just a wonderful way for me to play in ecstaticism, like being ecstatic and being able to channel even clearer, because I wasn't weighted down by earthly things and by earthly energy. I could really just expand out. And I guess that is the way of the medicine person and of
Or the shaman.
yeah, I don't like using that term anymore because it's been so, we tend to have I tend to have an aversion to using anything that's been mainstreamed or speaking to it, anything that's been
I mean, it's a Western term, like the Siberia, because they originally came from like Siberian people, but they didn't call
Yes.
themselves shaman. That's like what anthropologists called them. But hey, this battery is almost dead, so I don't know if you want
Okay.
to, because I think we'll lose it if we don't save it. So we're gonna.
Well, let's close out. Let's close out with possibly another deep breath and just intention. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, I'm always grateful. Thank you for entertaining our tangents and for hanging out with us for a time and expanding
We love you.
expanding our awareness as well as your own. I hope we bring something to the table that lights you up or brings you closer to home.
Leave us some comments or like and subscribe.
Please, anywhere and everywhere you listen or watch this,
Give us a rating.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate some interaction that really helps us get seen so that we can
We gotta feed that
continue.
algorithm beast. It's got
Yeah.
a never-ending hunger,
I'd love to be able to continue this practice
insatiable.
and get better and better and be able to bring more and more to the table. We love you all from the Fringe.
See you next week. Love you.
Aloha.